Inspiring the US Constitution and putting smut on pottery, the native tribes in the Americas were a lot more than you learned in your high school history class. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy has been called the oldest participatory democracy on the planet, and they may be part of the influence for a certain country you've heard of.
It's really important to note that the Founding Fathers actually came and studied among the Haudenosaunee.
That's not something you'll find in school textbooks. So who were the Haudenosaunee? You never heard of them? You actually have. You see, the French called them the Iroquois. They started out as a union of 5 tribes from the northeastern US and southern Canada: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca. They all formed an alliance long before the arrival of European colonists. In 1722, the Tuscarora joined the alliance, which then became known as the Six Nations. The nation remained united during the 7 Years' War, which you may know as the French and Indian War. They fought on the British side, which was the winning side, more or less. But when British colonists decided to fight for independence a few years later, the tribes were split, 2 for the rebels and 4 for the crown. Maybe things would have gone better for them if they'd picked the winning team. They lost much of their territory and political power when the British were sent packing. The Comanche were elite horsemen. Once horses were reintroduced to North America, the Comanche really took off, like literally. They rode southeast to hunt buffalo and trade with French colonists. Although they remained nomadic, Comanche groups dominated a wide area of the southern plains. And by dominate, we mean it literally, again. The proud Comanche nation battled the Republic of Texas and pretty much every other native group on the southern plains and beat the living tar out of everyone they saw. They were merciless. You know how decimate originally meant to take out 1/10? Somebody always brings that up in the comments. Well, the Comanche were more like take out 9/10. Seriously, they even took advantage of the distraction of the American Civil War to push back white settlers in Texas. But it didn't last. The full brunt of the US Army, plus our old friends cholera and smallpox, ultimately did in the Comanche. By 1875, most of the Comanche were herded onto reservations where they remain today, based outside Lawton, Oklahoma. The Natchez were one of the most powerful native groups in the lower Mississippi Valley. They were mound builders, and several villages of Natchez speakers and Tunica allies joined together to build the Grand Village. The name fit, too. It was a religious and political capital of the area. Grand Village is located in modern-day Mississippi, right on the Mississippi River. It also means it borders Louisiana, and back then, the French were in control of that side of the river. At first, the tribe made nice with the French, but as more settlers moved into the area, the Natchez became less chill. The nerve center of the French colony, Fort Rosalie, was uncomfortably close to the Grand Village, as in on the modern-day Mississippi side of the river, right up next to Grand Village. Needless to say, the situation was tense. In 1729, a new commandant ordered the Natchez to move so he could, liberate their land and build a plantation. His request was received as expected. A Natchez delegation went to Fort Rosalie to do some routine trading, bartered for a whole bunch of guns, then used them to shoot the colonists, killing the governor and most of the adult men and capturing practically all of the women and children. They also took close to 300 enslaved people, mostly Africans. In case you're thinking, well, at least they freed the slaves, that would be a no. The Natchez were big in the slave trade too, mostly capturing smaller tribes and selling them to the Europeans. Needless to say, French Louisiana was terrified.
The destruction of this colony was a bit like a 9/11 moment. It was such a traumatic event for them.
The French governor of Louisiana massacred an unrelated tribe to make a point that wasn't news to anyone. Well, anyone but the Natchez themselves.
The Natchez did not understand how many French there were at New Orleans and then back in France. And so, of course, the French amassed an army.
They and their Choctaw allies attacked the Natchez in 1730, overrunning them and selling 300 Natchez captives into slavery in French Saint-Domingue. That's a little place called Haiti today. Yes, that Haiti. Those who escaped headed north and took refuge with the Chickasaw. The Grand Village, now in downtown Natchez, Mississippi, stands today as a National Historic Site. The Cherokee were one of the largest tribes in what became the southeastern United States. When the British arrived in South Carolina and Georgia, they traded heavily with the Cherokee. The tribe maintained a shaky alliance with the British during the 7 Years' War and American Revolution. Much like the Iroquois we mentioned earlier, they backed the British in both battles. That means they picked a loser. And you know what they say about the victors and the spoils.
When Jefferson looked west, he saw empty space. He saw a sort of blank slate.
In order to resist the American land grab, the Cherokee consolidated under a Western-style government with a permanent capital, written constitution, and police force. They became one of the first native groups in North America to use written language. A Cherokee man named Sequoyah created a writing system unrelated to any other world alphabet. He then had to convince his fellow tribe members that it wasn't witchcraft. If you've ever heard the term civilized when talking about a North American tribe, what they mean is more like the European societies of the time, i.e. the Cherokee are recognized as one of the 5 civilized tribes. But if you think that stopped Congress from including the Cherokee in the Indian Removal Act of 1830, well, you don't understand the drive for profit. Despite a Supreme Court injunction, most Cherokee were expelled from their homelands to what became Oklahoma on the forced march now known as the Trail of Tears.
It occurred in the middle of winter, and the deaths from exposure and disease were appalling.
Some Cherokee remained in eastern North Carolina and exist as a separate tribal organization today. The Pueblo peoples of New Mexico are not one group, but more of a catch-all for similarly operating tribes. About 70 independent Pueblo villages existed before the Spanish showed up.
It's here that they created one of the most highly evolved civilizations ever known.
When the Spanish arrived, they did their usual run of conquering and dominating, but they crossed the line when they took to whipping the holy men of the tribes. One of the men who'd been whipped, Pope, returned to Tas Pueblo determined to drive the Spanish out. He sent knotted cords to each Pueblo group that agreed to join the rebellion. Leaders untied one knot each day, and when the knots were all gone, it was go time, August 10, 1680. By August 21st, the Spanish had fled, leaving behind some 400 dead. The Pueblo ritually cleansed themselves of the Christian rites they'd been converted into and enjoyed 12 years of independence. You already know how the story ends, but they did have 12 years before the Spanish won out and took over the region. A number of Pueblo and groups still live in New Mexico, and while they face challenges when it comes to preserving their history and culture, they endure. In 1537, the Spanish arrived in what is now Paraguay and northern Argentina to find over 1 million Guaraní people. The term Guaraní is a bit like the Pueblo, more of a catch-all for closely related tribes. Initial friendly relations collapsed when the Spanish tried to force a Guaraní to work for them and convert to Christianity. As you can imagine, many Guaraní died of illness or in battle, with the rest forced into colonial systems. Some did escape to the forest, and they were able to keep elements of the Guaraní culture alive even to this day. The legacy of the Guaraní is their language. Today, Paraguay is effectively bilingual in Spanish and Guaraní.
This is the only bilingual country in Latin America, perhaps because of the epic resistance of the native Guaraníes to the Spanish conquest.
But Guaraní survival has been complicated, and not always in a good way. Later leaders of independent Paraguay used the native language to keep them down. In short, those native Guaraní speakers were second-class citizens. Things are certainly better, especially in Paraguay. In the other countries, well, the continued use of Guaraní doesn't go over well. But overall, things are on the upswing for the Guaraní. The exact origins of the Inca state are difficult to establish, but their dramatic rise began in 1438 when they exploded out from their Cusco Valley homeland in the mood to conquer. They occupied an area that went from modern Ecuador to central Chile. They created a sophisticated government and established a network of roads along with the tax code to pay for them.
They were master road builders. Perhaps some 14,000 miles of roads throughout the Inca Empire they maintained.
When the Spanish arrived in the 1520s, the Inca were the largest and most centralized state in South America, and they did it all without either the wheel, written language, or money, relying on llamas to get around. The Inca might have been well equipped to fight off the Spanish, but an ill-timed civil war weakened them, and Spain swooped in and took over. Ultimately, the Spanish would not be stopped in their quest for gold. What survives is Quechua, a descendant of the Inca language, still among the most widely spoken indigenous languages in South America. Before the Inca, the Moche were the major power in what became northern Peru. They were master potters, architects, and engineers. Flourishing from about 81 to 800, their culture is one of the most distinct and impressive of all pre-contact Native American groups. Moche artifacts are so detailed and numerous that they allow researchers to piece together significant information about their lives, even though the Moche didn't have written language and went into decline before anyone could record their beliefs or history.
Archaeologists found evidence that the cities had been abandoned, and this extraordinary civilization seemed to vanish into the desert.
You know what made them most extraordinary? 2 words: erotic pottery. You can tell a lot about a society by the amount of smut they put on household items. And let me tell you, the Moche would practically require you to prove you're 18 just to have a bowl of soup. After the Spanish and their prudish Inquisition-minded ways came in, the vast majority of Moche works were suppressed. So go get your hands on some Moche sex pots. Yes, that's a real term, because they are very valuable and collectible. Initially wanderers, the Aztec, or the Mexica as they called themselves, established what would become their state in 1325, after an omen appeared to their leader, an eagle eating a snake perched on a cactus in the middle of Lake Texcoco in central Mexico.
A sign from the gods that they had found their new home.
That same symbol graces the Mexican flag, kind of like how Mexico got its name from the Aztec. Not to go too far afield, that's one theory on how Mexico got its name. Anyway, this ancient Aztec settlement became the capital of Tenochtitlan, which is modern Mexico City today.
Aqueducts, palaces, pyramids, and temples stood as a tribute to their gods.
The Aztec were incredibly powerful in the region. Those human skulls didn't just rack themselves, they ruled smaller tribes by fear and military force. Talk about irony. Like their counterparts, the Inca, the Aztecs might have been able to resist the Spanish onslaught if not for two factors: diseases like smallpox and measles, and those same local tribes who didn't like their heads and hearts ripped out all the time. Despite what Neil Young sang about, the Aztecs weren't all sunshine and rainbows. The empire fell in 1521, but the Aztec legacy remains. Nahuatl, the Aztec language, still has about 1.5 million speakers, and more Aztec artifacts are being discovered and preserved as Mexico City grows. The Maya rose in about AD 250 and flourished for centuries before their dramatic collapse shortly after 900. Located on the Yucatan Peninsula and adjacent parts of Mexico and Guatemala, the Maya weren't a politically unified group. They organized themselves into independent city-states who sometimes traded and other times fought with each other. While Mayan society never rebounded after its mysterious contraction, the Maya were far from extinct. Several hilltop cities remained powerful until the Spanish showed up, and their religious practices continued among the farmers and villages in the lowlands. Today, the Maya are best remembered by their remarkable ruins, notably Tulum and Chichen Itza. Remarkably, Chichen Itza was an incredibly diverse city and major trading spot for the Maya, which makes their collapse even more perplexing. Between Mexico and the upper countries of Central America, there are approximately 10 million Mayan living there today, about half of which still speak their native tongue.